Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something. Life doesn't always go according to the plan we write for ourselves. In fact, it rarely does. There are days when we feel like we've been hit from all sides, when the weight of the world presses down and the unfairness seems almost unbearable. You've probably asked yourself, why is this happening to me? And it's okay to feel that way. It's human. But what I need you to hear today is this: God's plan is greater than your current circumstance. God's sovereignty is the unwavering truth that He is in complete control of everything in the universe. It's easy to forget that, especially when we're facing personal struggles or when life seems to spin out of our control. But even in those moments, God's sovereignty remains. The challenge is not in whether God is in control, but in trusting that His control is better than ours. We often think of sovereignty in terms of a ruler who dictates laws from a throne, but God's sovereignty is so much deeper. He's not distant, sitting passively on a throne while we try to navigate our lives. He is actively involved, guiding us through every step, even when we don't understand why things happen the way they do. Understanding God's sovereignty means recognizing that nothing happens by accident. Every event in your life, whether good or bad, has been allowed by God for a reason, and He is using those moments to shape you, refine you, and lead you into a greater purpose. His sovereignty assures us that even when we don't understand, He sees the bigger picture, the eternal picture. His perspective is far beyond our own limited view. It's important to know that God's sovereignty doesn't negate human choice. We still have free will and we still make decisions every day. But even in our decisions, God's hand is at work. He is able to use our mistakes, our failures, and our successes to fulfill His divine purpose. This isn't something that should make us passive in our faith or indifferent to our actions. On the contrary, it calls us to trust more deeply. It means that we can have confidence that nothing in our life is wasted. God's hand is in it all, working everything together for our good and His glory. When we truly grasp God's sovereignty, we also learn to let go of the need to control. We stop trying to figure out all the answers on our own and rest in the truth that God's plan is far greater than ours. It's like a parent guiding a child. A child doesn't always understand why they can't have candy before dinner or why they need to go to bed early, but the parent, seeing the bigger picture, understands the importance of those decisions. In the same way, we often don't understand why things happen the way they do, but God in His infinite wisdom knows exactly what we need and when we need it. Trusting in God's sovereignty also means trusting in His character. He is a good and loving Father. His decisions are never arbitrary, and He isn't in control of our lives out of some impersonal, distant will. He is for us, and His sovereignty is always exercised for our benefit. Even in the moments of hardship, we can be confident that He is using those trials for a greater purpose, one that we may not see right away, but one that will ultimately lead to our good. Understanding God's sovereignty invites us to let go of anxiety, stress, and fear. If God is in control, we don't have to be. His plans for us are filled with love and hope, and when we trust in His sovereignty, we place our lives in His hands, knowing that the Creator of the universe is also the one who holds us in His care. In this understanding, we stop trying to figure everything out and begin to rest in the security that only God can provide. We don't need to be in control because He is. And because He is good, His sovereignty is a source of comfort, not fear. Faith through adversity is one of the most profound aspects of our spiritual journey. It's easy to have faith when life is smooth, when things are going according to our plan, and when the blessings are flowing. But real transformative faith is forged in the fire of adversity. It's in the midst of trials, pain, and suffering that our faith is tested and strengthened. Adversity challenges us to confront our beliefs at a deeper level. When everything around us seems to fall apart, it's natural to question God's goodness, His timing, and His presence. Yet the beauty of faith is that it isn't contingent on our circumstances. It's not based on what we see, but on the unseen promises of God. Faith through adversity is trusting that God is working even when we don't understand why. Adversity is not something that happens by chance or is out of God's control. We must understand that God often allows adversity to enter our lives, not to harm us, but to shape us into the people He created us to be. The struggles we face are not wasted. God uses them as tools for growth, refinement, and preparation. It is through hardship that we often learn the most about God's faithfulness and His sustaining power. Faith through adversity requires us to hold on to God's promises, even when the evidence around us seems to contradict those promises. When the storms of life are raging and the waves of doubt crash over us, faith is the anchor that keeps us steady. It's the belief that God is still good, that He is still with us, and that His plan is still in motion, even when we can't see the way forward. In moments of adversity, we often feel alone, abandoned, or misunderstood. It's easy to believe that God has forgotten us or that He isn't paying attention, but the truth is, God never leaves us. His word assures us that He is near to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. Faith through adversity means remembering that God's presence is not determined by our feelings, but by His promise. Adversity also helps us develop a deeper sense of reliance on God. It's in the valley, in the difficult moments, that we truly learn that we cannot do life on our own. When everything else crumbles, the only foundation left is God's unwavering faithfulness. Faith through adversity shifts our reliance from our own strength to the power of God working within us. It's in the weakness of our circumstances that His strength is most evident. When facing adversity, we can sometimes feel tempted to take matters into our own hands, to rush through the pain or to seek shortcuts to avoid the discomfort. But part of the journey of faith is trusting God in the waiting, trusting that He's doing something in us, even when it feels like nothing is changing around us. It's learning to sit in the discomfort, to believe that God is doing His best work in the midst of our worst moments. Adversity also brings about a refining process. Just like gold is purified in the fire, our faith is refined through the heat of trials. In adversity, we become more like Christ. Our hearts are softened, our priorities shift, and our trust in God deepens. It's in those moments when we have nothing left to hold on to that we discover God is enough. Faith through adversity is not about denying the pain or pretending it doesn't exist. It's about acknowledging the hardship while holding on to the truth that God is with us, He is for us, and He will see us through. It's about knowing that even in the darkest moments, the light of God's love is still shining, guiding us, and leading us to the other side of the storm. Patience is one of the most overlooked yet powerful qualities that can shape our lives in a world that thrives on instant gratification and quick results. Patience stands in direct contrast to the culture around us. Patience isn't just about waiting for something to happen. It's about how we wait, with faith and trust in the process. It's in the waiting that God works, and it's through patience that we allow Him to do His work in us. When life doesn't unfold the way we expect it to, our first reaction is often frustration. We want things now. We want the promotion, the breakthrough, the resolution to our problems. But what if I told you that the power of patience isn't just about waiting for an answer, but about trusting that God is already at work, even when we can't see it? Patience requires us to surrender our timeline and accept that God's timing is always perfect. His ways are higher than ours, and His timing is never late, even when we feel like we're running out of time. Patience is not passive. It's not about sitting back and doing nothing. True patience is active faith. It means choosing to trust God in the process, to keep moving forward, and to continue seeking Him even when the outcome isn't clear. Patience is the refusal to let our circumstances dictate our peace. It's the strength to stay faithful and steady even when things aren't going according to our plans. In many ways, patience is the crucible where our character is refined. It's in the waiting that we grow. God doesn't always move at the speed we'd like, but in that gap between promise and fulfillment, we are shaped into the people He desires us to be. Waiting is not a punishment. It's part of the preparation. Think about how a seed grows into a tree. It takes time for roots to grow deep, for branches to stretch toward the sky. But when it's finally fully grown, the tree is strong and enduring, able to withstand storms. The same is true for us. Patience builds our spiritual strength, making us more resilient and more capable of enduring life's challenges. Patience also teaches us to trust in God's provision. We live in a society that places a premium on achieving success quickly, but God doesn't rush us toward his promises. He walks with us through the process, teaching us the value of timing and preparation. Patience shows us that what we need will come at the right time, and that God's provision is always better than our own attempts to force things to happen. The Bible is filled with examples of people who had to wait for God's perfect timing. Abraham waited for the promise of a son. Joseph waited for the fulfillment of his dreams, and the Israelites waited for the promised land. In each case, God's timing was not only perfect, but it was also designed to build trust, perseverance, and dependence on him. Patience also shifts our focus from the outcome to the process. We're so often fixated on the destination that we forget that the journey is just as important. When we choose patience, we stop rushing through life and start living in the moment. Patience teaches us to find joy in the process, knowing that God is doing something in us right now, not just when we get what we've been waiting for. It's in the waiting that we learn to appreciate the small steps, the lessons learned, and the growth that happens along the way. God's work in us is not about quick fixes or immediate results. His work is deep, transformative, and often slow. Patience acknowledges that the process is as important as the result. When we are patient, we are not just waiting for something to happen. We are being shaped into the people who can handle the blessings that God is preparing for us. It's easy to look at others and think that they've reached their destination while we're still waiting. But God's timing is perfect for each of us. Patience teaches us to trust that God is preparing us for what's next and that his plans for us are worth the wait. The power of patience doesn't just affect us personally. It influences how we interact with others, how we deal with conflict, and how we show up in relationships. Patience allows us to extend grace to others, to be slow to anger, and to be understanding when things don't go as planned. It helps us to be a living testimony of God's love and grace, demonstrating the same patience he shows to us every day. When we develop the power of patience, we unlock a deeper sense of peace and trust in God's process. Patience is the quiet strength that helps us weather the storms of life without losing heart. It is the quiet assurance that no matter how long it takes, God is working in the waiting, and his promises will never fail. Perspective is a powerful thing. It has the ability to shape our thoughts, our actions, and ultimately our entire experience of life. Two people can look at the same situation, and one may see only obstacles while the other sees opportunities. The lens through which we view the world directly impacts how we handle the challenges and blessings we face. One of the most crucial aspects of perspective is how we view our circumstances. Life is full of ups and downs, triumphs and struggles, but how we perceive these moments often determines the course of our journey. Our perspective can either limit us or empower us. When we focus only on the difficulty, it can feel overwhelming. The problems appear insurmountable, and the road ahead seems uncertain. But when we shift our perspective, we begin to see possibilities where we once saw barriers. We begin to understand that every challenge carries with it an opportunity for growth, and every setback may be setting us up for something better down the road. God's perspective is different from ours, and understanding that difference is key to living a life of faith and peace. God sees the end from the beginning. He knows the bigger picture, the purpose behind every season of our lives, and the steps we need to take to get to where he wants us to be. From our limited human perspective, things may seem chaotic or unfair, but God's view encompasses everything: our past, our present, and our future. He knows how every twist and turn in our journey is ultimately shaping us for a greater purpose. Trusting in God's perspective means acknowledging that even when we don't understand, he is at work in ways that go beyond our comprehension. A shift in perspective also helps us develop a sense of gratitude. When life is hard, it's easy to focus on what we don't have or what isn't going right. We can get caught in the cycle of comparison, always looking at what others have and feeling like we're falling short. But perspective allows us to see beyond our current struggles and recognize the blessings that surround us. Even in times of difficulty, we can find moments of joy, love, and purpose if we choose to look for them. A shift in perspective doesn't deny the challenges. It simply chooses to focus on the good that God is doing in the midst of them. Perspective also affects how we relate to others. When we don't fully understand someone's behavior or choices, it's easy to judge or criticize. But when we pause and consider things from their perspective, what they've been through, the struggles they face, and their own unique challenges, we begin to approach them with empathy and grace. Perspective teaches us to be slow to anger, slow to judge, and quick to listen. By choosing to understand others' viewpoints, we foster stronger relationships and create a culture of kindness and patience. Often, perspective can be the difference between being a victim of our circumstances and becoming a victor. When we face adversity, it can feel like life is working against us. The weight of the world seems heavy, and we may wonder why we're going through what we're going through. But when we change our perspective, we begin to see that our trials are not punishments, they are refining moments. Adversity, when viewed through the lens of faith, becomes a powerful tool for growth. It's in these times of struggle that we are forced to dig deeper, to rely on God, and to find strength we didn't know we had. What seemed like a setback can, in reality, be a divine setup for something greater. Another key aspect of perspective is understanding the eternal perspective. It's so easy to get caught up in the temporary pressures of life, but the reality is that this life is only a small part of the bigger story. What seems like a major crisis now may be a blip in the scope of eternity. Understanding that our struggles are temporary, that God is preparing us for something far greater than what we can see right now, allows us to endure with hope. When we realize that the pain and the frustration we experience in this life are not the end, but part of the larger narrative God is weaving, it gives us a renewed sense of purpose and endurance. Having the right perspective also impacts how we view success. In today's world, success is often measured by wealth, status, or external achievements, but God's perspective on success is different. Success in God's eyes is about faithfulness, obedience, and living out His purpose for our lives. It's not about how many things we accumulate or how many accolades we receive, but about how closely we walk with Him and how we steward the opportunities He gives us. When we understand this, we begin to redefine success and find contentment in being faithful to what God has called us to, regardless of how the world defines it. In life, the importance of perspective cannot be overstated. It determines how we handle setbacks, how we relate to others, how we face adversity, and how we live out our purpose. When we align our perspective with God's, we begin to see things through His eyes, with faith, with hope, and with an understanding that He is working in all things for our good and His glory. Life has a way of surprising us often when we least expect it. We all experience moments that feel like setbacks, moments when the road ahead seems unclear, when our dreams are delayed, or when the weight of the world feels heavier than we can bear. In those times, it's easy to miss the truth that God's blessings often come disguised as challenges. What looks like a roadblock could very well be the very thing that positions us for a greater blessing in the future. When we encounter hardship, our first instinct is usually to focus on the pain, the difficulty, or the disappointment. We ask questions like, why is this happening to me? Or why is everything falling apart? The frustration, the uncertainty, the unanswered prayers, they cloud our vision and keep us from seeing the bigger picture. But in those moments, we need to remember that God's ways are higher than ours, and His plans are greater than we can fully comprehend. Often, God's greatest blessings come wrapped in the packaging of pain, confusion, or discomfort. Take, for example, the story of Joseph in the Bible. Joseph was betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, and thrown into prison. On the surface, his life seemed to be one disappointment after another. Yet each one of those moments of hardship was not a random misfortune. God was using every experience to mold Joseph into the leader he was destined to become. What appeared to be a series of unfortunate events turned out to be part of God's plan for his life. The blessings that Joseph would experience, from interpreting Pharaoh's dreams to ultimately saving his family, were all the result of the adversity he faced. God's blessings in Joseph's life came not despite his trials, but through them. We all experience seasons when it seems like life isn't going the way we imagine. But when we look at these seasons through the lens of faith, we can begin to see how God is at work in ways we might not understand right away. Sometimes God withholds blessings because he knows we aren't ready for them yet. He's preparing us, refining us, and developing our character so that we can handle the blessings he has in store for us. In the waiting, in the struggle, God is building our strength, patience, and trust in him. We might think the delay is a setback, but it's actually a setup for something greater. Think about the times in your life when you faced unexpected challenges. At the moment, those situations may have seemed like burdens too heavy to bear. Yet, looking back, you may realize that those very struggles led to the breakthroughs, growth, and opportunities you never would have encountered without them. God often uses closed doors, unanswered prayers, and even heartbreak to guide us towards something better, something we couldn't see at the time. Blessings in disguise also come in the form of lessons. Sometimes the struggles we face are God's way of teaching us something we couldn't learn any other way. Whether it's learning patience, humility, trust, or gratitude, these lessons are invaluable. We may resist them in the moment, but they shape us into who we need to be to step into the next chapter of our lives. God's blessings often involve growth, and growth isn't always comfortable, but it's in the discomfort that we develop the resilience, wisdom, and character that make us stronger. Moreover, blessings in disguise can also come in the form of relationships. There are people who come into our lives during our most difficult seasons, people who encourage, uplift, and support us when we feel like giving up. These relationships, though sometimes born out of hardship, are priceless gifts from God. They are the people who help us discover new depths of faith, who walk with us through our darkest moments, and who remind us of God's faithfulness. God uses others to be a part of his blessing to us, often in ways we never expect. Sometimes the blessing is simply that we emerge from the trial stronger and more refined. God uses adversity to shape us, to move us closer to the person we are meant to be. The pain of the present moment often leads to the strength and clarity of the future. It's not always easy to see in the moment, but God is working in us even when we don't feel like it. Every trial, every setback, and every painful situation is part of his redemptive plan, shaping us into something more beautiful and purposeful. When we think of God's blessings, we often picture material things, success, or smooth sailing. But God's blessings aren't always about what we receive outwardly. Sometimes they're about what he's doing within us. The blessing might be the patience we develop, the faith that grows, or the peace that surpasses understanding that we experience through the storms. These are the blessings that last, the ones that can't be taken away by circumstances, because they are grounded in the eternal work God is doing in our hearts. It's crucial to trust that God sees what we cannot see. What looks like a detour might be the very path God is using to lead us to our greatest purpose. When we trust him, even in the midst of uncertainty and hardship, we open ourselves up to the possibility that God is doing something incredible, even when we can't see it with our natural eyes. The key is to recognize that the challenges and struggles we face are not signs of God's abandonment, but opportunities for his blessings to manifest in ways we may not immediately recognize. One of the most profound aspects of the peace that comes from trusting God is the freedom it brings. When we trust God, we are free from the need to constantly worry or strive for perfection. We no longer feel the need to prove ourselves, to earn his love, or to live up to unrealistic expectations. Trusting God means understanding that we are loved unconditionally and that our worth is not based on our achievements or failures. This truth gives us peace because we know that our identity is secure in Christ. We don't have to strive for approval or live in fear of failure because God's love and peace are already freely given. So trusting God also means accepting His timing even when it doesn't align with our own. So often we become impatient and anxious when things don't happen as quickly as we want or expect. But when we trust God's timing, we understand that He is working all things together for our good. His timing is always perfect, and His plan is always better than anything we could try to rush into. This peace comes from knowing that while we may not see the whole picture, God does, and He is orchestrating every moment in our lives with care and purpose. Finally, trusting God brings peace because it anchors us in the truth that He is faithful. God has always been faithful, and He will continue to be faithful. When we remember His past faithfulness, we can trust Him with our present and future. The peace that comes from trusting God is rooted in the security that He has never failed us and never will. No matter what we face, we can rest in the knowledge that God is always working on our behalf, providing for us, protecting us, and leading us toward His perfect will. The peace that comes from trusting God doesn't come from avoiding challenges, nor does it promise a life free from pain. Instead, it is a peace that exists in the midst of difficulty, a peace that comes when we choose to place our trust fully in God's character, His plan, and His presence in our lives.